This is the weekly sales meeting for November 9th, 2025. My name is Chris Fleming. You can reach me at chris@cdmediaconsulting.com or go to our website at cdmediaconsulting.com. Today's topic is frame the customer's problem. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is rushing into solution mode before fully diagnosing the customer's problem. We show up with a presentation or slide deck full of features, but forget to first do the most important job. That job is to clearly define the problem. Without a well-defined understanding of what is wrong, the solution will feel forced or disconnected. The presentation will seem unnatural, and the buyer often walks away confused, skeptical, or worse, unconvinced. Sales is a lot like medicine. You wouldn't trust a doctor who writes a prescription without asking questions, running tests, or listening to your description of the symptoms. Yet in sales, it happens every day. Sellers will pitch the cure before the diagnosis. We assume the buyer knows what is wrong. Or worse, as sellers, we assume we already know the answer. But as author Stephen Covey once said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That is the foundation of all influence. And in the sales profession, it is the foundation of opportunity. Start by defining the problem. Do this and you accomplish three things essential to your success. Right off the top, you build credibility. You will uncover the buyer's real needs. By getting the customer to state the problem out loud and in their own words, you can start to create a compelling case for change. This approach not only makes you look prepared, it makes you a source of real value. Instead of pushing a cold pitch, you are framing a conversation that matters. Buyers are more likely to listen, engage, and trust you because you are showing them something meaningful. And when trust and relevance meet, the chance of earning the sale increases. The Vegas odds tilt in your favor. Let's start with credibility. Buyers are flooded with messages every day, as many as 30 or more, all from vendors who claim to have the next great solution. What they don't often see is someone who listens. A salesperson who enters a meeting asking thoughtful, specific questions immediately stands out. It shows respect. It shows preparation. It shows the buyer that you didn't show up to talk, you came to learn. According to Salesforce's State of Sales report, 78% of business buyers say they expect salespeople to act as trusted advisors. Trusted advisors don't rush. They diagnose, and they frame the problem in the buyer's language, not the seller's. That brings us to the second benefit, uncovering real needs. Many customers don't understand the scope of their problem. They need someone to help them articulate it. It's a lot like being a therapist. You need to help your patient talk through the issues they have never said out loud. A good salesperson helps the buyer verbalize pain points. These are the real pain points that have only registered in the back of their mind. They have never dared utter them out loud. When the buyer says, I hadn't thought of it that way, you are on the right track. You are not selling anymore. You are helping them see something important. Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, wrote, "You can't persuade anyone of anything until they figure out there is something wrong." That is as true in sales as it is in crisis negotiation. If the buyer doesn't believe there is a problem, they won't be motivated to fix it. But once they admit a problem, which means they have stated it out loud and in public, they will start looking for a solution. That is when selling becomes easy because now there's a gap to fill and you can help fill it. That brings us to the third advantage, building a case for change. One of the hardest parts of selling isn't introducing the product, it is breaking through inertia. Businesses get stuck in their ways, teams fall into routines, leaders grow comfortable with what is familiar. Change feels risky, even if what they are doing isn't working all that well. That is why framing the problem works in your favor. It makes the cost of doing nothing visible. It makes it hurt a bit. Top-performing sellers are 53% more likely to teach their buyers something new about their business. And it's usually something that reframes their thinking. That reframing begins not with answers, but with questions. And good ones, not the rote, mundane questions they are used to hearing. These are the kind that make a buyer pause and say, "That's a good point." The moment they say that, you are no longer a vendor. You are the guide. You are on your way to becoming a partner and being a trusted part of that business's inner circle. Too many sellers rush past the most important step. We jump into product features, advertising plans, and case studies. We are hoping something sticks. but we skip the pause. If we pause a moment to ask what is really going on here, we might get further. Without that pause, the conversation stays surface level. The buyer may listen and even agree, but there's no urgency. There's no real traction. Why? Because the problem was never defined. And if the problem doesn't feel real to the buyer, there is no reason for them to take action. Great salespeople do the opposite. They build the problem before they build the solution. They dig deep. They ask open-ended questions. They get the buyer talking. They're not only talking about symptoms, but about causes, consequences, and costs. As the buyer talks, the problem will begin to take shape. And once it has shape, it needs a resolution. That is where your solution fits in. It is not as a sales pitch, but a natural next step. The customer then sees it as what they should do now that the problem is on the table. A great example of this comes from IBM's legendary sales training of the 1980s. They taught that the customer doesn't want a drill, they want a hole in the wall. But the best sellers didn't stop there. They were trained to go even deeper and ask, why do you need the hole? Maybe it was to hang a shelf, store tools, or ensure safety. By uncovering the bigger purpose, they could tailor the solution in a way that was relevant, specific, and far more persuasive. Today's buyer is no different. They are not looking for a product. They are looking for relevance. They want to feel understood. They want to know that you get it and that what you are offering fits into the bigger picture of their business. That connection doesn't begin with your solution, your brand, or your sales pitch. It begins with their problem, their goals, their universe. When you start there, you earn the right to be part of their story. And that is where the real sales conversations begin. There is also a science to this. Behavioral economics shows that people are more likely to act to avoid a loss than to achieve a gain. This is known as loss aversion. It is a concept developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. It means your buyer is more motivated to fix a problem than to chase a new opportunity. But they won't feel that loss, and they won't be motivated to act, that is, until the problem is clearly framed. That is your job as the seller, not to make them feel bad, but to make them see what is at stake. What could go wrong? What happens if nothing changes? What is the cost of the delay or non-action? That is why the diagnostic phase is so important. It is where the real sale happens. It is where the buyer begins to own the issue, as ownership is the first step towards action. The best sales organizations build their process around this. They teach their sellers how to ask better questions. They slow down early conversations. They train sellers to listen not only for facts, but for feelings. These are their frustrations, fears, and desires, because that's where the decisions will come from. According to a study by Forrester, 77% of B2B buyers said their last purchase was complex or difficult. That is a clear message to us in the selling profession. That message is that the way you sell matters. Jumping straight into a sales pitch doesn't simplify the process. It only adds confusion. But when you slow down and take time to clarify the problem, you build understanding. And with understanding comes trust. In sales, trust isn't only a bonus, it is a requirement, because in a complex buying journey, trust is what moves the deal forward. Then the next question is, how do you put this into action? First, reframe your sales process. Make the first meeting entirely about the customer. Don't bring a demo, don't lead with a slide deck, bring questions, bring insight, and listen more than you speak. Second, build a structure for diagnosis. Use tools like problem mapping, root cause analysis, or customer journey exercises. Get the buyer to see their situation in a new way, and let them talk through the impact of that situation on their team, their revenue, and their goals. The more they talk, the more ownership they feel. Third, reflect on what you've heard. Play it back to them, not in your words, but in theirs. Say, it sounds like your biggest concern is that your team is spending too much time on manual reporting. This is slowing down your ability to respond to client needs. Is that right? And when they say yes, you've moved from pitching to partnering. And finally, connect your solution to the problem they defined. Not the problem you assumed, not the one your trifold brochure mentions, the one they admitted to. That is where relevance lives. That is where urgency begins. This approach works across industries, across deal sizes, across verticals. It does not matter what you are selling, the principle holds. Define before you prescribe. Diagnose before you deliver. Frame the problem before you try to solve it. Donald Miller is a best-selling author, public speaker, and CEO of StoryBrand. This is a company that helps businesses clarify their messaging. They use the power of storytelling. He is best known for his book, Building a Story Brand. It teaches companies how to position their brand as a guide in the customer's journey. Miller's framework is used to focus on the customer's needs and problems first. He writes, "If you confuse, you lose. But if you clarify, you win." And there is no better way to clarify than by making sure everyone understands the problem first. This is how you create pull instead of push. That is how you move from cold calls to warm conversations, and how you go from pitching products to presenting partnerships. Too many sales teams teach their sellers to start with the value proposition, but value only exists in the context of a problem. Without that context, it is noise. When we jump into selling too soon, we miss the chance to shape that context. The deal suffers for it. Winning salespeople are the ones who know how to guide buyers through discovery. We will do it with patience, not with pressure. We are comfortable with silence. We don't jump in to fill every pause or rush to rescue the moment. Instead, we trust the process. We will listen. We will ask insightful questions. We let the conversation unfold. This approach leads to deeper insight, it's stronger relationships, and better outcomes. Because when a buyer feels heard and understood, they are far more likely to move forward with confidence. It is not about pitching. It is about positioning. And the best position you can ever take is the one where the buyer sees you as someone who helped them understand their own business better. That is not only good salesmanship, that is good leadership. And in today's market, the seller who leads the thinking wins the deal. So slow down. Get curious. Diagnose before you prescribe. Because the more you can frame the problem, the more likely you are to own the solution. And that is not theory. Those are real results. My new book, Double Your Revenue, is now available on Amazon.com. If you like what you have heard here today, please consider ordering a copy or two. You can always send one to a friend. Go to cdmediaconsulting.com right now and follow the instructions to order.